Hey there everyone, it's Esports Hector and welcome back for another fun and informative video. Today's topic, we will be going over mental performance. For context, I help athletes with certain aspects of mental performance, whether it's talking about how to prevent anxiety from going on in-game or just working on communication skills with their team. When it pertains to esports, mental performance is huge. So join me as we look into how we improve your mental. This will be more of an overview as I will look to create more videos into the future and provide more context. Stay tuned. So as we look into mental performance, we can look at this as two different areas, the conscious or analytical, as well as the subconscious. But first, let's go over the conscious area of mental performance. We always think about what can we have done better in a situation? Again, referring back to the conscious or analytical side of mental performance. Should I adjust my mouse sensitivity? With this, it's generally believed there's a correction that needs to be done, meaning you always need to course correct. When in fact, sometimes it can just be that you got outplayed and there's very little that can be done in that certain situation. Next, we look at the subconscious. So the subconscious is what most people would determine as a flow state. I'm sure many of you have been in flow state and not have even realized that you guys were in that flow state. I mean, again, it's why it's subconscious. Your body's just running through things and executing without you being present or actively thinking about it. This always is a funny conversation and something that I actually had yesterday with a group of people when we talked about traditional sports athletes going into the world of coaching and how oftentimes it's not always the best just because for the most part they don't actually know how to improve a player's performance. The question that always can be asked is, how did you do that? Oftentimes the answer is always going to be, I have no idea. And that's perfectly fine because you're so focused and your brain is running things in the background, you're not going to be thinking about it. So think of it very similar to second nature. Again, when we talk about second nature, something that's going to be very evident is just breathing. You're not actively thinking about breathing. Instead, your body's running all these executive functions in the background. And that's gonna be something that's really important as you get used to going into, again, the esports title of your choice. Or, for example, go out for a run. You're gonna be huffing and puffing and figuring out your pace to breathe. However, as you get more comfortable with your running, you're going to notice very quickly in fact, your body's going to be doing that function for you without even realizing it. Now, a lot of the time, we will always see something along the lines of facing adversity as well as some negative judgment. This can be more of yourself in-game, again, not allowing yourself to reach that subconscious level of play. I'll use a few clips throughout this video just to explain what it is that I'm talking about, so that way you're aware of handling adversity. In this clip, you can see once the round ends, these players seem checked out. Again, in a game like Rainbow Six Siege, things can change very quickly from round to round. That eventually will take you out of your flow state, and thus creating this idea of over-analyzing, creating doubt of what can happen. When we look at negative judgments, we look at how it forces a player to have to try harder. Again, in Rainbow Six Siege, this is something you always see, especially when they go into that post game going on Twitter or X and, commenting or tweeting, posting about them losing. They try to reflect and overanalyze and overcorrect how they could have done better, not necessarily the team. However, that's not always the situation. There needs to be some level of spontaneity to what is being done. And most of these guys don't just get into the pro leagues just because they did certain things. Now, when we look at how to get to the next level, things that they've done in the past is just the minimum. They have to find ways or other ways to excel. Compliments, while they can be positive, can also affect mental performance. I tend to use the wooden approach coined by famous UCLA men's basketball coach, John Wooden. And what sports psychologists will say as called the sandwich approach, where you present something that didn't work, how to improve it, and how to add something positive. So that way it creates a positive reinforcement, something that's going to want the player or force the player to do something better the next time. Now, I'm not saying you need to do this all the time. However, I think in pivotal moments in a scrim or in game during a timeout, it's going to be very useful. We can also look at trash talk, which is an interesting area. Just because trash talk, you see it all the time in traditional sport, you can also see it again in esports titles. We'll look at Rainbow Six Siege because the camera will oftentimes show a player just go off on the other team and create some trash talk. Now, instead of maybe creating this trash talk environment, bring the opponents back to the beginning of what we were just talking about with that analytical mindset. Force them to overanalyze situations and rethink if they're doing the right thing. That oftentimes can force them to have to start thinking in the moment as opposed to letting things just naturally happen. We'll now look into body position. I think this is something that's really important and always an area of conversation that I bring up with people regarding esports. So hopefully I haven't lost you at any point. If you enjoyed the content so far, if you could please smash that subscribe button as well as like it. This allows me to gain a wider reach and hopefully, be able to help more gamers either aspiring to go pro or already pro at this point. So let's get back to the topic. Body position is important. In esports, oftentimes it's evident when you see cameras showing the players. In the past, I could tell when players were completely checked out, then they were going to overanalyze, and at that point, they've already lost their composure. So, how do we make sure that we are not checked out? This is a great question to ask. I think this is part of gaming that needs to potentially improve, where we can create situations in-game to practice consistently. This isn't like football, where if I just keep throwing the ball at targets, it's going to eventually become better. My body's going to understand the dynamics of the movement and be able to overcome it, and therefore create an unconscious habit. Again, we want things to go from conscious to unconscious, okay, or second nature. So what we have to hope that the situation arises again in game or in match for us to be able to learn. However, there is a solution. I would say that using VOD reviews is going to dramatically impact a player's performance. This allows you to take the analytical side of things out of the equation because you're watching it, you're able to learn, and from there, once you understand that at a certain level or point, then you can start making these actions without having to think all that much. Before I sign off, something we have to do in game is make a quick switch from self-1 or that conscious over analytical aspect to our subconscious or second nature aspect of thought in terms of mental performance. Otherwise, you as a player will oftentimes go in tilt, start to blame yourself or your teammates, which is not going to be helpful to the team chemistry and team dynamic, or get locked into situations that will start to demotivate you. Now, I hope you were able to take this in, learn something useful, and now attack your next scrim or match with more of an unconscious effort. And as always, everyone, stay healthy and game on.